Hello, hello, everyone. We'll give you a couple of minutes to let everybody join. Amazing. We've loads of people dialing in today. Let us know where you're dialing in from. Use the chat. Tell us what companies you're from. Where are you dialing in from? Are you as roasting as we are in this heat wave?
Welcome to today's NI Jobs webinar. Really nice to meet you, and I'm looking forward to getting some engagement throughout the call today.
Amazing. Amanda, I say we could probably kick off.
Yeah, we could do. So, listen, once again, welcome to today's webinar brought to you by NI Jobs, where we'll be discussing the topic of candidate application quality. Including some interest and insights from research combined with our own experiences, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some tips and tricks on what you can do to improve your hiring outcomes in relation to application quality. So whilst we wait on some more people to join, let's go through some housekeeping pieces and some FYIs just for you. So this session will be firstly recorded, and we will share a handout of the slides in our full report after the session. The webinar will run for approximately 30 minutes, finishing with some key takeaways and a Q&A session. So please do use the Q&A box throughout to ask questions. This is what we're here for. And listen, we want you also to share your thoughts in the chat, and we'd love to hear what's working for you or where your main concerns lie. So this is a great way also to connect with other recruiters on the call. While we wait also, it'd be great to see who we have online today and where you're dialing in from. And then what I'll do from that is I'll formally introduce myself again once we get started. But as we know, I'm coming live here from the NI Jobs office in our Belfast office, where I'm looking out. It was blue earlier, so I'm just going to hope for that blue skies to continue for the rest of today.
Absolutely. I'm in the Dublin office, and it was very kind of wet this morning on the way in, and the sun is shining now. It's always the way. Whenever we're in the office, the sun shines. Where is everybody else coming in from today? Feel free to pop it into the chat and let us know. I'm nosy. I like to know where people are from and what's happening.
We want to see if anybody has better weather.
Hello, Kildare.
So, Belfast too here.
Amazing.
So I think, are we happy enough? Will we get started on today's session? So I'll just move on here. So welcome again, everyone. And we're delighted for you to join us today to talk about application quality. Today we're going to explore key findings from our Q2 research, which includes data from 642 recruiters across the UK and Northern Ireland and 474 job seekers in Northern Ireland. We'll also be sharing practical evidence-based steps you can take to improve the quality of applications you receive. This survey was conducted independently using a robust sample of the overall market of recruiters and job seekers. So this is not limited to NI Jobs users, which I think is really key because you will really see in the data the challenge of low quality applications are being felt across the market. We'll start with the impact that the application quality has on recruitment and what the data reveals. Then we'll look at why applications get rejected and what matters most to recruiters when screening. Lorraine will then talk us through quick actionable strategies you can implement, and we'll end with key takeaways and opportunity to ask any further questions. And then now to formally introduce myself. So I'm Amanda Bell, Enterprise Customer Success Manager here at NI Jobs. I've been with the company now for 13 years, and during that time I've had the pleasure of partnering with a wide range of clients to help them attract the right talent and get the most out of our platform. And a lot of the topics which we're going to cover today really resonate with the conversations I have with clients on a daily basis. So today we'll explore key findings from our Q2 research, which includes data from 642 recruiters across UK and Northern Ireland and 474 job seekers in Northern Ireland. And we'll also be checking practical evidence-based steps that you can take to improve the quality of applications you receive. And really, to give some direct insights from a recruitment, people and HR perspective, I'm joined by my lovely colleague Lorraine, and I'll hand over to Lorraine to introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and look, so nice to see everyone here today. Every time I see that picture, I think to myself, God, I really need to update my picture. As Amanda said, I'm Lorraine. I'm actually based in our Dublin office. I'm a people partner lead for mid-markets here. So I support our employees in our Belfast office in NI. I support some of our Ireland-based employees. And then I actually also support some of Germany, Belgium, the UK. So quite a mix, but what I can definitely say is this is a problem everyone faces. And really what I do is support our internal employees as well, kind of working really closely with our talent acquisition team to help us find amazing talent too. So really looking forward to hearing your perspective today. Please use the chat. We really want to make this an open dialogue. And, you know, you might have a tip that we aren't talking about today that you might want to share in the chat. So let us all learn from each other. And yeah, Amanda, I'll hand back over to yourself. But like I said, just use that chat and keep talking to us, please.
Yeah, we want to see some engagement here, so we can help you as much as we possibly can. So basically, this is just us on how application quality impacts recruitment. So just moving on to the next slide here. So this is, so we're just going to ask a few questions. And again, we'd love to hear from you. So please do write your answer in the chat. So how satisfied are you with the quality of applications you receive? So you should hopefully see it come up in the chat there for you to select. Takes a little bit of a minute or two here just from this side. So, you know, just have a think in relation to your general application experience all across all platforms and methods in which you advertise. So it's just really good to see what's really coming through from your side. So, yeah, so we have the results in here. So we can see satisfied sitting around 29%. Somewhat satisfied sitting around 65%, and then 6% not satisfied. So basically the main thing now is let's see how your own results compare to that of the research that has been carried out. So as you can see, actually only 30% of recruiters say they receive high quality applications for their most recent hire. For context too, this survey for this report was conducted across our parent company and wider organisation, Stepstone, and for markets in the Republic of Ireland, UK, Austria and Germany. The findings across all market surveys are all consistent. Application quality is a market-wide problem. So the findings you can sort of see, despite high volumes of applications received by recruiters, an average of 22 per role. So we found in Northern Ireland that only 50% pass the pre-screening stage. So that really shows us it's not a volume problem, but a relevance problem. And is there anything you want to add, Lorraine?
Yeah, I think, look, we'll talk more about this, but like there isn't a bad or a poor applicant. Sometimes there can just be like a mismatch or a lack of a fit. So I think like the poor quality of the applications in terms of the role, it's really helpful to think about, well, what does this mean? Why is there a poor quality coming in? And we'll talk about this in our tips, but you know, how clear are we being? Is the job title aligned with the market? And you know, really utilize your account manager for that broader feedback as well. And that's something that we can do here in NI Jobs. But we'll talk about that a little bit more, but just really ask yourself those critical questions.
So let's now take a closer look at the key reasons those high volumes of applications are rejected. So we've seen how many applications make it to the first stage, but now let's look at the top reasons recruiters eliminate applications. So 70% of recruiters screen out candidates for lacking relevant skills for the role, which is obviously very sensible. 58% screened out candidates that lack relevant work experience. 1 in 3 for poorly formatted applications, and 26 for incomplete application documents. One point here I really want to emphasize is the issue of employment gaps. So it's sitting around 23%. With the current economic shift, tech layoffs, and changes in the labour market, gaps in employment, this is far more common and often not reflective of a candidate's ability or motivation. So it's important going in, in 2025 that we reframe how we interpret employment gaps and consider maybe asking clarifying questions rather than dismissing the candidate outright. So there may be excellent talent in that group who simply just need a second look.
Yeah.
So those are the lookouts here for recruiters to review, have a look at hiring criteria and manual or automated processes to make sure application processes are user-friendly and submitted application forms are easily representative of the candidate applying. And Lorraine, I would love to also hear your thoughts on this piece as well.
Yeah, and I would love to hear this in the room. Like, do you agree with these reasons? Is this what you are seeing? Like, are these the difficulties that are coming up for you in the virtual room? We know there's a supply, so we know that for sure. And we know that obviously the skill match may not be there, and we're seeing that in the research. So this, again, it really shows the importance of getting that feedback from the market. Why is there a lack of relevant skills or work experience for the role? If the applications aren't being completed, like, seeing the poorly formatted application, seeing the incomplete documents, really ask yourself, have you tried your own application process? How easy is it? If you were a candidate, would you want to apply for the job? Again, our teams in NI can help support with that as well. So rest assured the help is there, but really just sanity checking the basics. And that's what they are. They're the basics, but they're often the things that are missed and they're most critical to get right. There also can be other reasons maybe why applications aren't formatted properly. And kind of, Amanda, exactly what you touched on, like maybe ask yourself, how fair are we being? Like, we need to think about the equity reasons as well. For candidates, this is your best chance to put your foot forward. So obviously we don't have candidates on this call, but potentially we do. But really thinking about that as well for you and your impression that you want to leave with the candidates, how user-friendly is your process?
Perfect. Thank you. There we go. We'll move on to the next slide. So this is really, what do you look for in applications? So are these the same issues you're facing, or do you see different challenges? We'd love to hear a little bit in the chat. What issues are you facing, or do you see something different?
Yeah. We'll give you a couple of seconds. Yeah. I would love to know, what are the most common reasons that you reject an application?
They're all very shy in Northern Ireland.
I'm shocked. I think like a lot of the feedback we often get, again, or feedback I would see around the market, and actually, yeah, perfect, it's coming in the chat as well. Experience and right to work status. And I think that right to work status is kind of in line with what I was going to mention around like those overseas applications. And if there are reasons that maybe you're rejecting an application, ask yourself, how fair have you been when reading the application? Is this somebody that wants to relocate back home? Is this somebody that actually potentially has the right to work, but maybe the address filter is already kind of causing them to be rejected, not meeting the criteria? Yet, absolutely. Things that we see, and again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but when you're thinking about that criteria, really asking yourself, how high are our expectations? How essential, how clear have we been in terms of what's essential and what's beneficial? And then what are the reasons that you're rejecting? Anything, Amanda, coming up there that's surprising to you?
No, it's very similar just from daily conversations with clients. But, if you're on our site, reach out on those kind of issues. There's, features within our systems that we can sort of help minimize this. So, do reach out to your account manager and customer success manager on those kind of things as well. And we can guide you and point you in the right direction as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. Happy enough to move on then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So basically, we do have some tips and advice in the next section. So listen, I'm going to hand over to Lorraine for this section. So I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, and look, don't leave me alone. Keep writing into the chat. I love to see it. I love hearing what's happening for you. The good news is, as Amanda said, there are practical steps that we can actually take. So this is really, really key to know. So before we talk through this though, I do really want to get your thoughts, and I'd ask you to maybe guess the right answer from our survey data. So what percentage of candidates say that they don't have enough time to tailor their application documents for every job? So take a couple of seconds to pop in what you think it is, and then we'll chat a little bit through this in more detail. Hopefully nobody is too shocked by the data. And we'll give it a couple more seconds because we know it can be a little bit slow to pop up.
Are they coming through? Yep.
Amazing. Yeah. So we have 6% of people saying 45%, we've 17% saying 50%, 28% saying 59%, and 50% that are guessing 68%. And well done to the 50% that guessed correctly. It is indeed 68% of candidates that say that they don't have enough time to tailor their application documents for every job. In one sense, this is shocking. And yeah, I'm seeing the emojis coming in. And it is. I would agree. On the other hand, I suppose, yeah, Richard, exactly what you've just said. So job applications are now absolutely being treated like it's a swipe on a Tinder. And that's not how we want our roles to be seen. So we're going to chat through some tips on, I suppose, how to get a candidate to swipe right and have that perfect candidate. So looking at that and looking at tip number 1, for your application process, it's so important to define what is truly essential for the role. So the data that we've seen tells us that 41% of candidates are unsure whether their professional experience is actually sufficient. So that's really important feedback that we're hearing from the market, where there's actually that unsurety. And for us, it's really important to kind of streamline our requirements, be really clear in terms of how we want to broaden to the talent pool. Like, not every skill is a must-have. So again, like I mentioned previously, distinguishing between what's beneficial and what's actually essential, and really looking at that professional experience section and asking yourself, how clear have you been? Is a degree an essential, or is it like a desired? And again, you know yourself best what's going to work for you in your areas, but really, really just, I suppose, being critical of that as much as possible. 39% feel confused by the unclear job titles. And I think this is a really interesting point. And I know, Amanda, I think you were going to come in on this bit as well, but like, it's really important to be clear with the job title in line with the market, but also if you have an internal job title that potentially differs from what you're saying on the market, being really honest about that in the recruitment process so you don't lose a candidate is quite important. Amanda, did you want to feed in a little bit more around the job title piece? I know you'd mentioned about kind of step match technology and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so it's really just to echo what you said, 39% on the unclear job titles across Northern Ireland, and other sister companies globally. Like, we use step match technology to link your job title to relevant candidates. So this technology will match your candidates based on relevancy. So whether that be sending our job alerts to relevant job seekers or presenting your job listing within our job board search results. So not only are you confusing candidates with unclear job titles, you're actually making the top technology confused as well. So which in turn will decrease your job's visibility to potential candidates. And, and this is a conversation I have daily with clients. As a candidate, what would you look for if you were looking for this position? Just take that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I use myself as an example. Mid-markets only make sense to those of us that work within our company. To the external market, they don't know what that is. And if I was applying for a job, I'd be really scratching the head and saying, is this HR or what is this role exactly? So being so clear. And finally, 37% feel discouraged by too many job requirements. And look, I think this is just so important to call out when we're thinking about how we can be better aligned. Like, we know that females in particular can be quite discouraged if they don't feel that they meet about 70% of requirements. So again, it's so basic, but it's what's essential, what do you need, and being really, really clear. Within our company, one thing we've actually looked at doing when we're hiring our own kind of talent in is we try to limit our requirements, or like the job responsibilities, to about 5 bullet points. And the reason we do that is to try and be really, really clear with hiring managers. If it's not in your top 5, how critical is it to the role? Like, you can talk about the other requirements within an interview process. So again, just something to think about, but would love your thoughts in terms of what is the most common factor that contributes to candidates' uncertainty about whether a job posting aligns with their skills. So is it too many requirements are listed? Is it job titles often seem unclear? Is it like vague details on benefits, or is there no salary information that's shared? So we'll give you a couple of seconds. Hopefully not too topical of an answer, but let's see your thoughts.
Everybody's thinking about this question.
I know, yeah. In fairness, though, I think all 4 are up there in terms of answers, but what we're seeing, and yeah, great to see this, the answers coming in. 45% believe it's too many requirements being listed, and look, that's definitely a factor. But the most common factor that we see is exactly what the 40% answered, which is that no salary information is actually being shared. So 59% of candidates are uncertain of applying when no salary information is shared on a job. That is a very high percentage of candidates that you are losing out on because of a lack of transparency. And look, I think the days are gone of putting competitive salary and discussion to be had at interview cycle. Like, really think about who are you losing out on that is potentially your top talent. So the feedback that we're hearing is that candidates are suspicious when they're seeing, competitive salary to be discussed, things like that. And they want to understand what bands are they going to be working in. And so really asking yourself, how could we disclose the salary information? How can we be more transparent? And asking yourself, who are the people we're losing by not being honest? So again, for everybody, it's an internal battle before it's an external battle, because you're going to want to think about the employees that you have internally that are doing the jobs, and really asking yourselves, if we were to publish this salary and this job ad, exactly who would that potentially, demotivate internally, and what conversations do we need to have? But really start asking yourself, we know there's a push for transparency across the board. All of the countries that are within the EU directive will now have to start publishing their salaries. They'll have to start publishing the gender pay gap. All of that's going to happen. We know this is a conversation for absolutely every country. So start thinking about, how can you get ahead of the curve? Can you catch the right talent? And ultimately, how are you preparing for this? And I know it probably seems a bit scary, because you're thinking, well, God almighty, this is something we never would have talked about. Like, why do we now have to start thinking about it? But again, that's that. 59% of your candidates are uncertain of applying when no salary information is shared. And again, you're not on your own. You have each other. If anybody that's currently on this webinar actually discloses salary, pop it into chat and let us know how it's gone for you. And if there's anybody here thinking, I'd love to do it, but I'm not really sure how to approach it, that's what your account managers can advise you on as well. So again, you've got all the support and all the resources to help you to catch that 59% of candidates that you're potentially missing out on. So thinking about that, and again, asking ourselves, what do recruiters really consider essential? So looking at this beefy bit of information, you'll see that the key takeaway from this slide is we really need to challenge ourselves on what we label as a must-have. And I know some of you that have been really paying attention on this webinar are thinking, Lorraine, this is like the third time you said it, but that's because it's so important. So you'll see things coming up a lot. So, excuse me, you'll see proof of right to work, you'll see clear communication, you'll see kind of the complete set of application documents, the proficiency of language, all of that kind of stuff you're going to see coming up. But then we also see things that can be a little bit more subjective, and we really need to ask ourselves what's actually required for a role. And so for me personally, I don't think there's anything too controversial coming up here. I definitely think proof of right to work should be 100%. I'm a bit concerned about the people that don't ask for proof of right to work. But for you, for those of you watching, do you guys see the same, or what would your feedback be? So pop it in the chat, let us know. I'm seeing some thumbs up, so thank you. Like, this kind of nearly feels to me like an essentials checklist. When I think about proof of right to work, I can't imagine a world in which this isn't a question in a process, because, legally it has to be. But then I think about, that kind of the proficient language skills, like how required is that? When I think about communication, yeah, absolutely. If you're hiring a journalist, you need very clear and professional communication. Do you need that across the board? You know your own internal benchmark and you know what you need. But the more rigid our filters are, the more likely we are to miss out on really strong, adaptable candidates, especially in a tight labour market. So a quick action I'd say here is, next time you're writing a job description, distinguish between essential and nice to have, and ask yourself what's truly critical for the success of the role. Is there anything that we think we're missing here? Amanda, I know we go back and forth all the time about cover letters. What do you think about the battle of the cover letter? Do we need it or do we not?
Listen, sort of like, I would love to hear what everyone else's opinion is. What do you think of cover letters? Do we see them as essential? Do people still use them out there? Because we actually removed the cover letters feature from our application back in 2023. So it was really, the reason for that was to remove any complex and unnecessary barriers in the application process. So, 18% of candidates in NI now decide against completing an application when a cover letter is required. So have a think, what do you use the cover letter for? Is it information you're not getting from your CV? Or, so it'd be really good from the chat. Is it something, so I can see Chris is saying we rarely use cover letters. But I think it's more from a candidate. So you think if they're applying for a job, if they were required to do that cover letter, is it maybe affecting the drop off for that position as well? So it's really good to see. Rarely use them either from Joe, and then Connie agreed cover letters can be a barrier for an applicant. So that's really good to see in the chat as well.
Absolutely. I think we always get a bit of mixed feedback on this. I think it's such a barrier. I think the day and age of cover letters are gone, but you'd be surprised the companies that still require them. And again, it's really making it easy for candidates to apply for roles and to get that right candidate. Adam, I definitely agree with your point. As a candidate, you want to be able to give kind of that best chance to give context about your application. But I'd be honest and really ask how many people actually read them, or how many people go straight for the CV. But it's a fair point that you're calling out. Looking at kind of tip number 2, moving on, this one's all about really thinking about how do we define our clear requirements from the start. So it sounds simple, but it's the most impactful thing that you can do. And we're going to talk about with the hiring managers how to align, clarifying what the role's really requiring, and really asking yourself what's missing. So to go into this in more detail, defining the clear requirements from the start starts with the hiring manager, because the hiring manager knows what they want. So really, we say here kind of a 2 to 3 hour deep dive meeting. That comes down to the availability you have to your hiring managers. If you can only get half an hour, take it. And really that pre-brief conversation needs to be really digging in on what do we need, what's essential, what's a must-have, and what's the success. Being able to consider the kind of role insights that you have potentially from the person that was previously in the job, that might be able to give you some insights on, this is what I actually did. or asking yourself if there's somebody finishing up saying to you, like, what were we missing from that person that we actually now recognize the role has evolved and this is what we need. So kind of using job shadowing or team meetings to define the real need to have versus the nice to have is quite important. And again, setting those expectations clearly. So those unclear or those misaligned expectations will lead to drop-offs and declines. And so clarity is key from day one. It's not just about the time and the effort of hiring, it's also about your company reputation. So really telling yourself and asking yourself, how do we want to be seen in the market? This statistic, I've kind of moved on because I think it's so important to call out. 25% who declined was due to tasks being different than those that were advertised. That's not just, it's not just a missed hire, it's a serious cost in your time, your resources, and your candidate goodwill, and that will impact your brand reputation. So what this tells us is it's not just, the clarity of your job ad, it's the consistency of what has been promised and what's delivered within the interview process as well. So that's where we refer back to that pre-brief with the hiring manager, the collaboration between the recruiters and the hiring managers, and being aligned at the start, because otherwise you're going to lose out on some really, really great candidates. I'm being told I need to keep moving because of time. I always do this, but I have a question for you all. Which of the following do you think was the most common reason that candidates declined a job offer after an interview? So was it working hours lacking flexibility? Was there no agreement on the salary? Was there a poor work-life balance? Or was there unclear responsibilities? So I'll give you all a couple of seconds to confirm your thoughts on that. And again, as usual, there's a bit of a mix that can come up, but we're going with the most common reason that we've seen candidates decline. Give it a couple of seconds. Yeah, Richard, I see your comment that they weren't interested in moving in the first place. And I think that's probably something I'll try and come back to later, but it's a great call out. But in terms of, I suppose, the answers to the quiz, we're seeing that 30% believe it was working hours lacked flexibility, 25% said there was no agreement on salary, 20% the poor work-life balance, and 25% had unclear responsibilities. So based on the data that we've seen, let me just move forward. Based on the data that we've seen, 36% mentioned that it was actually a poor work-life balance, which was a factor for declining the job offer. So you could argue it's quite linked to the flexibility piece, and it absolutely is. But really, we've seen this become so much more apparent since COVID. It's a hot topic. It's a topic I feel like we never stop talking about. We know that compensation and we know that work-life balance are very closely tied. But for us, what we're seeing now is that kind of work-life integration. People no longer want balance. They want everything to fit in. And we see a lot of focus around the culture, the values, getting a feel for the people that are working in the place that are applying as well. And looking at the different generations that we have in the workplace, we know that like our Gen Zs, so those that entered adulthood past 2010, we know that they prioritize that work-life balance over job security, which I suppose, we could argue the baby boomers always prioritize that job security over the work-life balance. So really thinking about that in terms of how flexible are you, what makes you stand out from the crowd? And I'd love to know in terms of kind of what you're selling for your company, what do you say that shows kind of your culture and your balance? Amanda, is there anything that you're seeing kind of, that your customers do around supporting this?
I know over the years this has become an increasing key aspect of a job description and actually ties into the employer brand. So more and more companies are focusing on that employer branding piece to attract candidates to ensure this information is known even before the job is even posted. So we work a lot with companies on their employer branding and see what works well with job seekers. We use our social media platforms a lot to promote this to the relevant potential candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I think as well, it can be the things that you don't even think are benefits that are benefits. So a lot of our employees have like doggy daycare and things like that. Because they don't want their animals left at home. And what kind of flexibility do you have on allowing dogs in the office, things like that? really asking yourself what's possible. Anybody that's watching from the Dublin office is going to say, well, where are our dogs? We're not allowed. We've tried, but at least we can say we've tried and we know for sure that the office won't allow us. But moving forward and looking at kind of tip number 3, and thinking really about how do we increase that application quality. It's around writing clear and detailed job descriptions. So we can see from our research that an unclear job ad will lead to a candidate drop off. And again, we know this information, but we are actually seeing 65% of job seekers saying that job ads are lacking clarity. So the salary, the responsibilities, and the job titles, they don't know what they're applying for. So why would they finish an application? So really being so clear when we think about what we want to say. Clarity starts with structure, using that clear, the jargon-free language, outlining the day-to-day tasks. This is what you will be doing, and differentiating again between that essential and that desirable. Again, if you're not sure, this is where you can use your account manager. This is where you can ask the questions that you might think, oh, does this seem a bit silly? That's exactly what we're there for. It's to support you to find the right talent. And filling your slots is just as important to us as it is to you. So again, really thinking about that and having that trust with your team. And finally, as we've seen, transparency does build trust. Like really thinking about, can we include our salary range? What flexibility do we have? What benefits can we put in to attract those better aligned applicants from the start? And sometimes there is such basics that you might think are very basic that you don't think to maybe put into your job description, whether that's kind of pension, whether that's a pay-in, whether that's dogs in the office, whether that's anything at all. It's really asking yourself, okay, how can I make myself step out of the crowd? How can I make me be an attractive place to want to come and work? Amanda, did you want to come in here on this?
Yeah, well, basically, I'm conscious for some people, we've given you a lot of information, and it might seem like we're giving you a lot of work to do, but where to start is my advice is you don't have to do a full makeover of all your job descriptions. Start with those, a small handful of those roles, especially the ones you're struggling with to fill. Use them as a guide and then test, and then see testing that and what can follow and sort of can come through there. Like, I really want to echo what Lorraine said, utilize the resources available to you. If you're an NI Jobs customer, reach out to your account manager or your customer success manager, because we really have access to really valuable insights and data points which really allow us to tailor advice on a case-to-case basis and even industry basis as well.
Yeah, and then really, what technologies do you have that can help streamline your processes and embrace that smart technology? And again, if you have something that you use, throw it into the chat and share your information. Knowledge is power, and we all really, we're all working hard to try and find the right candidate. So sharing of that information is so key. We've talked a lot about, overly complex processes. So where can you automate? What's possible? What tools can you use? We've talked about cover letters. We've talked about the drop off that we have with candidates. I think we said 18% that essentially will not reply if they see a cover letter. Ask yourself, how important is it? And be honest with yourself. If you require a cover letter, do you actually read them? Genuinely ask yourself that question. Secondly, we would think about, when we're thinking about that drop-off phase and how we can lose people, we know that we lose people because they don't have time to tailor their applications. So again, making it as simple of a click as possible, using features like autofill, CV uploads instead of lengthy forms, and asking yourself as well about kind of those mobile optimized interfaces to really keep candidates engaged. We know a lot of the time now candidates are looking at job applications on their mobile phones. So how easy is your application and how can it be viewed on the mobile phone? Again, balancing that tech with human insight. So everybody loves AI, and I do too, but humans are critical in AI. So we've seen kind of about 74% of recruiters have said that AI has improved application quality. But that same percentage of people are saying they don't feel applications are authentic anymore. And look, I think we've all been guilty of reading something and thinking, is that ChatGPT? So really thinking about, okay, can we use AI for pre-screening, for skills, for assessments, but relying on human judgment at the screening stage to ensure that authenticity and to make sure that the potentials are not being missed. And then finally, leveraging the smart matching tools that we actually have. Amanda, I'm going to come to you on this because you're a bit more of an expert than I am.
Listen, just echoing what you said, like I'm a huge advocate for simple application processes. Think on NI Jobs, 80% of our traffic now comes from mobile phone devices. In 2019, this was around 50%. So we're continuously seeing this increase year on year. So a key thing I always say is, recruiters should really complete, check the job seeker's journey from your side. Do it from a desktop, do it also from a mobile device. Have a look at your competitors' application processes as well. And if you're using a new applicant tracking system or changing your careers page or software, again, always complete the job seeker journey. And, once again, really put yourself in the shoes of your candidates. If that was you seeing that application method, see how easy it is. And, it can sort of bring up barriers that you may identify completing that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm being told I have to keep moving. So finally, kind of last tips we would say is think about the processes again. How can you improve accessibility and inclusivity? For us internally, we actually run like an accessibility lab across all of our offices that helps us to run our own products through our labs, to look at things like screen readers, how open are we to the entire market? How available are we, and what candidates are we missing out on potentially, and how can we make sure that we are as accessible as possible as a company too? So ask yourself what hiring practices you can look at here. Again, we've talked about those long job descriptions, the jargon, the unclear job titles. So really be very clear in terms of what you're looking for. Make sure that your language is inclusive, it's clear, and it's concise to attract that wider talent pool. Again, providing those feedback loops. It blows my mind we still have this conversation in 2025, but we still hear candidates that feel that if they're not hearing back from their job applications or not understanding why they're being rejected, that automatically, I suppose, gives them a negative impression of the organization. So really, even if you can think about an automated feedback or progress updates that can help to improve that candidate experience and encourage quality reapplications for the future. They might not be the perfect candidate for you right now, but they may be your perfect candidate in 6 months' time. And then again, really reevaluating the must-haves to widen that talent pool. Again, if you look at an application and you think, well, they haven't said why they had a career gap, so I'm not even going to entertain it. Like, what are you missing out on here? You could find someone that's gotten the travel bug out of their system and is ready to step into the corporate world again. So again, really just ask yourself, is my own bias kind of stopping me to find the right person? Again, thinking about what filters you have and who are you missing out on by being kind of overly rigid, again, in terms of what you're looking for. So focus on the skills, the adaptability, and the growth potential, especially for when roles where the talent is slightly more scarce. And then finally, we really want to wrap up now, remind you to download our application guide under our resources. We've shared with you loads of different ways you can improve the quality of your applications that you receive, from refining those job descriptions to clarifying those requirements. And you don't have to do it alone. Amanda, I'll hand over to you again, the expert.
NI Jobs were focused on connect employers with better matched, better prepared candidates. So, just remember, this is how we can help. Our platform uses smart matching technology to surface stronger candidates fast. Our dedicated team of account managers and customer success managers offer guidance backed by data to help you continuously improve results. So, which is our way to support and consistently recognise really highly related in our field. So, the outcome we're trying to achieve is less noise, more quality, and ultimately better hires, which is I'm sure you all want to hear from your side. So whether you're refining your hiring prep process or in fact wanting to improve the quality of your applications you receive, NI Jobs is here and we're all very happy to support you. So please do reach out to account managers, customer success managers. We're all here to help and support you.
Thank you all very much for joining today. Thank you for your engagement, your participation. If you had questions that we didn't get time to get to, reach out to us exactly like Amanda said. Have a lovely rest of your day, everybody.
Yeah, enjoy everybody, and thank you very much for joining. And
Thank
the
you.
rain's on in Belfast. Thank you now.